Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Today I have decided to discuss a poem with you, and this poem is very inspirational and a philosophical poem, and it deals greatly on the topic of death. And as you know that death is the ultimate truth, and death keeps no calendar. It can come at any time. And as you know that our soul is indestructible. In Indian philosophy also it is written that the soul is indestructible, no one can kill our soul, and it is only our body which perishes, whereas our soul is imperishable. So today I have decided to discuss the poem The Chariot, and this poem was written by eminent poetess Emily Dickinson. She was a child prodigy and she was born in Massachusetts, America, and she dealt largely on the topic of death, friendship, love, and she wrote many poems, and she can surely be told, surely be called a metaphysical poet. She was herself a metaphysical poetess because all the poems which she wrote are so deep in meaning that we will have to certainly make efforts to understand the poems which she wrote in her lifetime. And she was herself a child prodigy and she died at the tender age of 56. And this poem, The Chariot, was published posthumously. This poem was published after her death, and when we read this poem, then we find that we are human beings are immortal. We must not fear death, and we must not think death as a horrible thing, because death is omnipotent and death will come whether we are afraid of it or not. So, let's embrace this ultimate truth and try to understand one thing, that we will have to keep committing, keep doing our duties, and when it comes to go to meet our maker, then we will have to accept this ultimate truth happily, so that we may not find any kind of pain during the death. So, this poem, The Chariot, Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson wrote this poem, and in this poem, she is telling us that she has indeed personified the death. And this poem is full of personification and symbolisms. And she has personified death, saying that death came to her as a gentleman, and it did not have any haste to take her to the heavens abode. And she was busy doing her domestic chorus and she was doing her worldly matters. And as you know, this material life is full of pains, and the search of happiness is one of the chief sources of unhappiness. We are trying to find happiness through this material world, whereas, as you know, the more we have, the more we want. The more we try to get happiness from this world, the more we get frustrated and disillusioned. So, The Chariot by Emily Dickinson, let's read the poem. And in the poem begins with the poetess tells us that she was busy doing her work, her worldly works, and as you know, she was fully engrossed in this material world, and death came. So she was not ready to go to meet her maker. And as you know, all the human beings, we all human beings do not want to go to meet our maker, and we just lead our life as if we are imperishable, and in that way we keep hoarding money and we keep boasting in words, because I could not stop for death. So in the first line she tells us that she was not ready to go to meet her maker, because I could not stop for death. He kindly stopped for me. Now it shows the generosity of death, that death has come here to take her to the heavens abode. Now death also thinks that a human being is supposed to indulge in this material world. So let her complete the work so that she may come with her peacefully. He kindly stopped for me. He here is told for death. Death has been personified here. The carriage held just but ourselves. Now, the carriage, the vehicle in which they left this material world was, in that carriage there were three people: the lady who died, and the death was the driver of that chariot, and one more person was also present in that chariot, was immortality. And as you know that immortality is part and parcel of our life. So our soul is indestructible, and when we go to meet our maker, it is our body which is buried, whereas our soul remains imperishable. Now what happened? It so happened the carriage held just but ourselves. Now in that vehicle there were only three people and immortality. First one was the lady herself, second one was death as a driver of that chariot, and third one was immortality. Immortality has also been made as a personified object. Now we slowly drove, he knew no haste. Now they left the world, this material world, slowly drove. They started driving there. The death started driving the chariot. He knew no haste. Now the death showed immense civility, and it did not show any kind of haste. It was full of courtesy, because when the death had showed so much courtesy, so it was the duty of the poetess also to reciprocate the good deeds of death. So he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too. So she wants to tell us that when death showed his generosity and civility, so she also, and I had put away, so she also left her work undone, because she did not want to, she wanted to show reciprocal courtesy. Put away my labor and my leisure. Labor means the hard work which she was doing, because this world is full of labor and leisure. We indulge in hard work, and after doing the hard work we need rest. So we also need leisure time. So leisure means peaceful time, resting time. For his civility means generosity, because the death had showed immense civility, so it was her duty to reciprocate in the same manner. We passed the school where the children strove at races in the ring. So what it so happened that in these lines the poet is talking about the lifespan of a man. First of all childhood, then youth, and then old age. And first of all childhood comes, thereafter youth comes, and thereafter old age. So these lines are symbols of the three phases of our life. We passed the school where the children strove. So she wants to tell us that the material world, she was talking about this material world. We passed the school. While they were going towards eternity, they saw that there was a school, and in that school the children were striving. Strove means they were struggling to get something in the races. It shows that this material world is so much full of struggle. And strove at races. At races means during lunchtime, the children. So this shows the first phase of a man's life, childhood. And we passed the fields of grazing grain. And then she tells us about the fields which are full of grain. So grain means grown crop. So grown crop means youth. Now she is talking about youth, that the grazing grain, that the fields were full of mature grains. We passed the setting sun, and thereafter she talks about the last phase of a man's life, and that is old age. And as you know, death is the first chapter, is the last episode of the first chapter of a man's life. And we passed the fields of grazing grain, we passed the setting sun, and then they passed the setting sun. It means she is talking about, she is summing up the entire human life, childhood, youth, and the old age. Now, or rather, he passed us. Now, in these lines, she wants to tell us that she had started losing her material gains, she had started losing her material control of this material world, and she was now heading towards eternity. Past us, the dews drew quivering. Now, when the sun was set, then as you know, in the evening we start feeling some kind of coldness. So she also started feeling quivering. It means she was finding herself very cold and chill, quivering. She started trembling, and there was cold. For only gossamers my gown, because she was wearing a homely gown which, in which she was doing her work, because now the dress has lost its significance, because we have gone to meet our maker. So when we go to meet our maker, then the dress which we wear has lost its significance. Now, only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We passed before a. Now these lines suggest that the materialistic things do not carry any weightage after we have gone to meet our maker. And my tippet, we passed before a house, then they reached a house. It means, now here the death is a driver, the death is taking the lady towards eternity, and the carriage is like a hearse. Hearse means the last vehicle in which we go to the graveyard. So in that way, the carriage is like a hearse, so that when we die, then we go from our house to the graveyard, and in that way we go through these experiences. So house, now this house means graveyard, grave. Now she tells us that her physical body was buried there in a grave. House that seemed a swelling. A grave is a place, is we find some swelling in a grave, and of the ground. On the ground we find some swelling on the grave. A grave is made of some swelling on the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, and the roof could not be seen there. The cornice in the ground, and since then its centuries and yet feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horses were towards eternity. Since then its centuries and yet, and we now, because she had gone to meet her maker, so she had also lost her power of experiencing time and conceiving time. Now she could not conceive how much time had been spent after her death, and shorter than the day, feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horse's head were towards eternity. And see, when the death had come to take her to the heavens, then at that time she had understood that she was heading towards eternity and immortality. So she had speculated earlier when she died that she was going to be immortal and her physical body will be buried. So this poem is full of metaphysical conceits and full of symbolisms and personifications, and it tells us that we must not fear death, because death is the ultimate truth and our soul is indestructible. So we will have to embrace it happily, and we will have to give up our materialistic gains and materialistic indulgence so that we may die peacefully. Thank you.